Sure, sure, sure. All right, hey yo. Rico Jr. is gonna go ahead and present his Torah over 10. Okay, because it's 15 minutes.
Okay.
This is the one.
I'm not grabbing the coffee cup. That's necessary.
Cool. Yeah, that's fine.
That makes sense.
That works for me. We can do that real.
Now I'm not in front of you the whole time.
You got it?
That's always awkward. Okay.
Here, I'll sit down.
Right? Sit down. It's actually funny. So because this is like 15 minutes. By the way, if you're not a verified channel on YouTube, you can't upload anything past 15 minutes. It's really weird.
Really?
So that's why there's actually two parts. Part one is just the portion recap mostly, and part two is all the other did you know and interesting stuff. So we'll just keep it at this for right now.
Sure.
And you guys can watch part two because it's like a minute and 15 seconds. So if you don't have time for that, I don't know what you're doing. So we have Tazria and Metzorah. So we have a double portion this week, and both deal with the same concept, which is purity. In the case of Tazria, it's ritual purity. In the case of Metzorah, it's a mix of the two, moral and ritual. And the way that we know this is because of the circumstances in which people are bringing their offerings, their sin offerings and their burnt offerings. So the first thing we need to really do is examine what is a sin offering. Because in the case of Tazria, we have women bringing an offering after the purification time of their child, be a boy or a girl. If it's a boy, it's a little sooner. If it's a girl, it's a little bit later. But the point is, when they bring their offering to the temple, it's considered a sin offering, even though having a child isn't really a sin. There's nothing about that that's sinful. There's nothing about that that's immoral or that would lead you away from the presence of God in any sort of moral sense. But we're talking about sacred spaces. We're talking about a culture in which you have a designated area which you cannot enter if things have happened, such as the shedding of blood. In which case, anyone who, well, you all here, obviously, you all know that birth is a bloody thing. I'm sure your mothers and fathers have told you this. I know mine did. Many times it scarred me. But the point is, it's a bloody occasion. It's not something that's very quick or clean. So these things, it's by the act of shedding of blood is what draws you away from the presence of God. And not in a moral sense, but in a ritual sense. So if a woman had just given birth and she could walk, she couldn't enter into the holy temple, right? Because she had the shedding of blood. She needs to take that time away to maintain that sanctity. And this is something that we don't really understand these days because we don't really have sacred spaces in the same sense. We do in some cases and we don't in others. Right? Your home is a sacred space. So if some random person just walked in there, it's something to be alarmed about. It's something like that. We need to be in the right state of purity, in the right state of ritual cleanliness to enter into these certain sacred spaces, which is why some people can enter the temple, other people can enter certain courts of the temple. Only one person a year can enter the Holy of Holies for these exact reasons. So Tazria is about the ritual purity, kind of demystifying it. Because everybody in the ancient world thinks that it's all about demons and the underworld, and that if you have mold in your house, that's because demons are attacking you. If you have like a weird discharge, it's because demons are attacking you. If you have the shedding of blood, it's because demons are attacking you. So a lot of these things, and actually in chapter 14 is a great example of that because this is talking about a leper's house. This is a really good example of this. So you have a leper's house, and a leper's house, for knowing that people don't know or haven't read the portion, you should read the portion. If you haven't read the portion, let's say this is my house, and in this TV isn't a TV, it's a big black spot of mold or mildew or whatever. So obviously I'd be alarmed by this because it's not normally there. I didn't build that there. So then I would call a priest. He would come by and examine it. Say, all right, we have this weird mark that just appeared. Let's go ahead and examine this for about 7 days. We're going to take everything out of the house so that nothing else gets unclean or infected. And we're going to see if the black spot spreads out further, then we'll take off the stones of the wall and the plaster and put that into an unclean place. Replace it, and we'll see what happens. Give it another 7 days. If it returns, then there's something in the house. There's something, maybe not, to them it would have been a spiritual, a demon, an entity. To us, in our science-based logic world, it's a form of mold. It's aggressive. It's probably somewhere in the wall or the deeper part we don't see. The point is, if it does spread, they would tear down the entire house and then rebuild it. Does that make sense? We do that today. If you move into a house or you buy a house and there's severe mold everywhere, you're not just going to move in anyway. You're going to have it removed. If you can't have it removed because it's too much, you you bulldoze it. You have to. It's a health risk. It's a health hazard. That's why we have health codes. The temple was a great example of health codes. Tazria and Metzorah are simply health codes for either your house or skin conditions, medical conditions, giving birth. It's about ritual purity and moral purity in a health conscious sense. So going back to the house, once you tear it down and you rebuild it, then the priest, or if the spot did not spread, it's this image for like 15 minutes. This is it.
Oh, that's the only image?
This is all you get. All this is 15
that's
minutes.
The only, oh,
yeah,
wow.
that's it. It's great. I know. It's super simple. You're already good. You're good. Sit on down. Take a break.
Wish I had some coffee.
No, this is mine. Shut that head. So, once the spot is either contained or has been resolved by removing the stones, smack the mic. Oops, got that
I do it all the time.
Right?
All the time.
So once the issue's been resolved, the priest will then perform a ritual consisting of two turtle doves, a vessel with fresh water, linen, hyssop. Was it linen? It was hyssop, scarlet, and I think one other thing.
It was cedar.
Cedar, thank you. So they kill one bird, put the blood in the water, bury it, and they take the other bird with these elements, dip it in the water, release the bird, and now the house is ritually clean. I can see in your eyes, like, that doesn't make any sense. That didn't clean the house. It didn't clean the house, you're right. But this is a time where people think that this black spot is a demon trying to burrow its way out of my wall, killing me. So fixing that problem and then having a priest come and do the ritual. Now I'm up here, I feel better, and I know my house is clean, so I'm going to physically feel better. So I have to understand and have to look at it to that context of, to these people, at this time, magic is a real thing. Sorcery is a real thing. Demons are a real thing. And everyone's freaked out about it. So when you see they brought a sin offering for things like giving birth, things like a skin condition, things like a discharge, things like your house has a weird mold in it. It's not so much because you made an error morally. Unless it's leprosy, that's a different story, but we can cover that. It's because we need to ensure that the sanctity of the temple is preserved, the sanctity of Jerusalem is preserved, the sanctity of your home is preserved, and the sanctity of just your own sacred space is preserved. And that's what these are meant for. So it's just as much for the body as it is for the mind. Now, going on to leprosy and the differences therein, you'll notice in this portion that it's only regarding leprosy they talk about a guilt offering as well. So normally it's a sin offering and a burnt offering that they bring. The burnt offering is meant to be as thankfulness to God. In the case, again, going back to childbirth, it's like, thank you for letting me live through this ordeal. I could have died. People died all the time. People died today of childbirth. It still happens. So you bring that as like, thank you for letting my child live and letting me live. And the sin offering is to allow you to return back to that sacred space and make you ritually clean so that there's no issue there. When it comes to leprosy, and you've been deemed you have leprosy by, again, a priest, but the same process. They examine it, they give 7 days, they quarantine you. That's what this means. The priest shall shut him up. So they would quarantine you for about 7 days, and they monitor you. Like, is it getting worse? Is it getting better? Depending upon that, they might give you another 7 days. And if it still gets worse, they would declare you unclean. Now you have leprosy. Now you can't enter the temple. You have to leave the camp. Now your family is shamed. Now you're shamed. Now you're living in exile. Now you're living in chaos. Now you're living outside the realm of life because you're associated with death. Right? And leprosy itself will eventually kill you. That's, again, you can look that up on your own. It's disgusting. That being said, when it comes to when leprosy is healed, when a leper is healed, which has happened once that we can, well, not once in the temple history. That was with Yeshua healing the leper and he told him exactly, go present yourself to the priest as Moses said. The steps therein would be you go back. So first, before you can get to the temple, you have to have a priest come to you to enter Jerusalem and declare you ritually clean enough to enter the city. Because there's different levels. Once you get into Jerusalem, that's one level of holiness. Then you get to the Temple Mount. That's another level of holiness. Then the inner courts, and it just keeps going up and ascending to the Holy of Holies. So just to get into the city, you have to have a priest declare you clean enough to do that. Once that happens, you get to the temple, you present yourself there, and then again, now this is when you bring your guilt offering, your sin offering, or your purity offering, and your burnt offering. The guilt offering is because leprosy and those kinds of skin conditions were associated with immoral behavior, with something you did, something your family did, some sort of curse that came upon you, a weird, like, divine disease. So that's why they have that. And that's to allow you to be both ritually clean because of the sin offering or the purity offering, but also morally clean. That way you feel like you haven't done anything wrong. Everyone clearly sees, okay, well, you've atoned. You brought your guilt offering. There's no problem there. You brought your sin offering, your purity offering. Nothing wrong there. And you brought your burnt offering. Okay. You follow the steps. The person then has a mikvah. They change their clothes. They shave all the hair on their body, including their eyebrows. And then at that point, an extremely interesting and rare thing happens. They're presented at the gate of the eastern gate, which would be during the Second Temple period, the Nicanor gate. Yep. It would be the northern door. Yep. And they after the mikvah, they would present the previous leper, who's now clean, in front of everybody in the court. And this is everybody in the cities here, because they're all bringing their offerings and doing their things. So it's in front of everybody, and they have the blood of the guilt offering touch the right earlobe, the right thumb, and the right big toe. This only happens for the priests. We can see that in a couple previous parashahs when Aaron and his sons were ordained. The exact same thing happened. And the only other time this happened is when Moses was connecting the people with the altar at Mount Sinai. He sprinkled the blood on the people and on the altar to connect them forevermore. So you just don't put blood on people in the temple just for nothing. That's why when this happened in the first century, people freaked out. Because the healing of lepers is also a sign of the coming of the Messiah. So everyone at that time was like, oh my God, the Messiah is here. This guy, this leper, who we all know, because everybody has to know who the leper is. That way you can avoid the leper. Because you don't want to be touched by the leper. So there's the guy. Oh, there's Frank. 2 weeks ago, I couldn't touch him. There he is. Okay. And now with this ceremony, with the rendering of the guilt offering and the purity offering and the burnt offering, with the giving of the blood and the ordination of the person now being declared clean, now no one can ever say that he's a leper. No one can ever talk smack about him. Because when you do that, now you're talking smack against God. Because God's chosen vessel, the priests, have just declared him by the laws given by God that he's clean. So if you're going to keep saying, no, he's a leper, I don't believe that. I don't trust that. Now you're saying that you don't believe God. And that's a very different story, because now you're committing moral sin. And that opens you up to things like leprosy, to things like chaos and death. So that's a lot. It's a lot in a few chapters. But we need to keep the context in mind of the people that are living at this time and what they believe is affecting them, as opposed to what is actually affecting them. Again, leprosy itself is a skin bacterial infection. We know that, but they didn't know that. So to them, it was demons, it was magic, it was sorcery. So these rituals, these offerings, these sacrifices, it seems like a weird, unnecessary thing, but when you start looking at it through their eyes, now it's giving them peace of mind, and it's helping to keep them healthy, both in body and in soul and in mind.
They realized that the leprosy in the Bible is the same as the modern one.
Yeah, it's different.
Scales disease, that would be the definition of the one that they're talking about.
Yeah.
But the one that we have is curable.
It's Hansen's disease, I think.
Yeah, but it's not the same thing as this one.
Right. There's a biblical leprosy, which we don't know exactly what it was, because a lot of people that had it, they were avoided actively, so it's not like anyone was going to study it for science.
And the leprosy got on objects.
Yeah, exactly.
Hansen's disease,
like houses, like clothing, like leather, like stone even sometimes. So it's a strange thing that we don't exactly know what it was. They definitely didn't know what it was. So these rituals are a way for them to combat this thing that they don't fully understand because they don't have science. But this is their attempt at making things pure, not just in a moral sense, but in a spiritual, not a spiritual, in a ritual thing, in a ritual sense. Any questions? No? Anybody want me to explain anything further? Yes.
I'll talk about that.
You got that?
Yeah, I have all of those.
Oh, perfect. Okay.
Could you actually elaborate more, if you can, on in chapter 12, the purpose of the purification offering? Because I know they're going to have those questions, and I don't want to address it too much today.
In what context?
So, in context of why should a woman after childbirth be obligated to bring? Just elaborate one more time, because we're going to talk about it.
The obligation of a woman to be purified after the birth of a child, or after her menstrual cycle, and all this goes back to the shedding of blood. Right? People at this time didn't know that it was just a regular thing. Look, again, God knows it's a regular thing. And the temple authority and people knew, okay, well, every month this happens. and it's possible to have discharges, and giving birth does shed a lot of blood, but the act of shedding blood itself made you impure because life is in the blood. And so the shedding of that blood is an act of impurity. Right?
So it's ritual uncleanliness, not moral.
Exactly. There's nothing immoral about having a child. There's nothing immoral about giving birth because it's a natural process that women were built for.
Or you can put it like in a clean sense.
Yeah.
Physically clean. You know what I mean? Like if somebody shed blood, you don't want them to come to your house, cover your blood.
Precisely. Yeah, you don't want blood all over your house because it starts to congeal, it starts to stink, it gets gross, it starts to be corrupted. So blood itself is not a clean thing, but this isn't approaching the act as in like a medical sense.
Right.
This is purely from, I want to access the temple, I want to access these sacred objects, which is why it stipulates that after a woman has a child or when she's in her state of nidah, she's on her menstrual period, you don't touch any holy objects. You don't eat holy foods. Anything you sit on is now unclean. So it's not that the woman herself is immoral or wrong. It's just the act of shedding blood because it goes against the sanctity and the order of God. Now, blood has its place. As we know, the offerings have a lot of blood involved. But it's not sprayed all over the walls. And everything is done in a controlled way.
Right.
And when you have the shedding of blood that is outside of that regular order, now that brings you into a state of impurity. Ritual impurity, not moral. Ritual is easy to solve.
Yes.
We have the answer right here for ritual purity. It's the moral purity that needs to be addressed via guilt offering. It needs to be addressed within your heart first, and then you bring the offering. And that's the hard part.
No, thank you, because I don't address that in this instance because I remember you talking to me that you're going to talk about it.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
But I know that they would have that question, so I thank you for elaborating.
You're welcome. I do go more into this on the video, yes.
Now, since we're talking about the blood of the woman and like the cycle, what will happen nowadays? Are we not allowed to come to communication in that moment of time, or?
Well, that's a valid question. You have to think, ritual purity has its place, but it's connected to the temple. So if there's no temple, then technically we're all ritually impure just being here. Because I guarantee you, this building was probably near something impure. It was probably built on something impure. So if you went to a funeral, if you pass by a cemetery, a lot of the things we walk on are built on top of dead people and stuff. So we're constantly ritually impure, which is something, again, it's easy to fix via a mikvah or an offering, but we don't have access to those things because they don't exist currently. Once they do, that's a different story. But as of right now, ritual impurity isn't really an issue because there's no temple to solve that problem. It's more about moral impurity, which is what Yeshua was talking about a lot more. Because in the first century, they were pushing ritual purity as being just as important as moral purity. And if you get ritually impure, now it's just as bad as being morally impure. Which is why, I think it was Simon, which is why Simon or Peter didn't want to eat with Gentiles. He didn't want to associate with Gentiles. Which is why when he had the dream about Cornelius and the animals on the sheet, I was telling him, no, Gentiles are not defiled, unclean animals. Gentiles have just as much right in the kingdom if they submit to the covenant and believe by faith and enter into the Torah and obey. But you can't live under ritual purity laws because then we're all going to go to hell. They're not the same thing. They're not. They have to be separate.
I think it's like you said before. It's about going to the temple.
It's about going to the temple. It's exactly it. It's all connected to the temple.
You can't apply that in a modern system.
Precisely. So if it is your time of the month, don't worry about not being able to come to congregation because the congregation is not itself the temple. It doesn't have the same level of holiness. It doesn't have that same status. You should be fine.
People go to the extremes.
I mean, it's a valid question.
Yeah.
So it's
I ask because like I've seen people that
Yeah.
will literally tell me, no, I'm not going because of that. So I'm like, oh, that doesn't make sense because
It's right, exactly.
we don't have a temple.
Like there is no temple at the moment. Once there's an altar and a temple and those things are brought back, then when you go there, then it matters. Over here, it's like, oh, whatever.
And I think that everybody at that time, they understood it was something natural, but nobody was really panicking.
Right. No one freak out every month when it happened. It would just be, all right, well, it's that time of the month again. Why don't you go on over there, and we'll see you in 7 days. Just chill out, and then we'll bring up to the temple, and we'll have the offerings, and then you'll be good to go. It's one of those things. Any other questions?
I mean, yeah, and I think in the Jewish writings, it says that the husband has to help her out.
Yes.
And every month, she has like a dress.
Yep, exactly. And also, just to bring this up, There are other examples of ritual impurity which only last until evening.
Yeah.
So there are different types of ritual impurity. So there are ones you need to bring an offering for. Other ones you're just unclean until evening. Right. So it's a way of God's telling the people, like, no, it's not demons. You're not sentenced to hell because of an emission or a discharge or because it's your time of the month.
They would leave the time of the month.
They would believe that. So no, you're just ritually unclean for 7 days. After that time has passed and everything's fine, you bring your purity offering and you're good to go. If you've had a discharge, you're just unclean until evening. Okay? You're not doing it with demons. You're not going to the underworld. It's fine. Just wait, give it a day, come back tomorrow, no problem. So as long as we take it from that practical sense, then it's gonna make more logical sense to us, being that we are in a more science-based Western kind of theology society. Anything else? Any other questions? I like your hat, by the way. Any other questions? Anybody? Nope. Good. Appreciate you. All right.
Thank you.
You're welcome. All right. And now comes the fun part with the bigger PowerPoint. Oh, thank you. Love it.
All right. Tazria Metzorah. Okay, this is Leviticus 12:1 to 15:33. Okay. Thank you. So the topics for today: circumcision. Okay, and y'all watch Ice Age. You remember when?
I know why you put that picture.
Leprosy. Yeah, we're gonna talk about circumcision and leprosy. Okay, that's why I really appreciated Rika talking about chapter 12. Never discusses the purification offering after giving birth and stuff, because it's not something I dove into today. I will dive into today. It's not something I wanted to do because I wanted to focus on these two topics. Okay, so I appreciate you. Everyone's taking pictures of this. Yeah, I didn't see that until later. Oh, here, go ahead. I wouldn't do it. No, the other one starts with L and ends with E. Lice. All right, so we're going to go ahead and do the blessing over the Torah before we get started. Okay, Baruch atah Adonai Hamavraham, Baruch atah Adonai Hamarad Leolam Bayed, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, Asher bachar banu mikol hamim, v'natan lanu. I don't know why I did the Hebrew. Et Torato, Baruch atah Adonai Noteina Torah. I usually do the English one, and I don't know why I did that. I really need those lessons. I'm telling you. I don't. Sheesh. Yes. With me.
Next time.
Oh,
okay.
I like the initiative.
All right. So, today we're going to focus on honor and shame and new creation. Okay. Actually, it's applicable both with circumcision and leprosy.
Technically, with all of the entire part I shot, both of them, pretty much all 6 of them are applicable in some way.
Yeah, but for our purposes today, those are the ones I'm going to address. The honor and shame status reversal with the leper. Okay, also by coming into the covenant that was made with Abraham through circumcision, we're going to see new creation as well as honor and shame. Okay, so let's go ahead and move forward. We're going to start off with chapter 12. This is the one that talks about the purification offering after birth. Okay, the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, "Speak to the people of Israel, saying, if a woman conceives and bear a male child, then she shall be unclean 7 days." Again, morally unclean or ritually unclean? Ritually. There's nothing immoral about having a child. Okay. As at the time of her menstruation, she shall be unclean. And on the 8th day, the flesh of his foreskin shall be circumcised. This is the chapter I'll bring up circumcision. Okay. Then she shall continue for 43 days in the blood of her purifying. She shall not touch anything holy, nor come into the sanctuary until the days of her purifying are completed. But when she bears a female child, then she shall be unclean 2 weeks. As in her menstruation, she shall continue in the blood of her purifying for 66 days. And when the days of her purifying are complete, whether son or daughter, she shall bring to the priest at the entrance of the tent of meeting a lamb a year old for a burnt offering, and a pigeon or turtle dove for a sin offering. And He shall, again, a sin offering. Is that the right translation for that? No, there's no sin in giving childbirth, right? So what is it? Purification offering. Thank you. For a sin offering, and he shall offer it before the Lord to make atonement for her. Then she shall be clean from the flow of her blood. This is the law for her who bears a child, either male or female. If she cannot afford a lamb, then she shall take 2 turtle doves or 2 pigeons, for one for a burnt offering, and the other for a sin offering, and the priest shall make atonement for her. Okay, again, please know, there's no sin in giving birth. There's no sin in menstruation. Okay? It's just ritual uncleanliness. All right? There's nothing immoral about it. So the 8th day, let's go back real quick. Over here it says, on the 8th day, the flesh of his foreskin shall be circumcised. Okay? Why the 8th day? Because it also represents resurrection. Okay? So 8th day, think resurrection. That's also going to be applicable when we talk about the lepers. The leper. Because that's, on the 8th day, they're good to go. So we're going to talk about that. Okay? All right. So circumcision. What is it? Okay, it is a physical act that I'm not going to get into today. Okay, it was already described perfectly in Leviticus 12. Okay, but here's the thing, though. It is a spiritual thing. It is an internal thing for us, right? Being previously Gentiles, okay, we weren't circumcised on the 8th day. Okay, so we have a decision. Whereas prior to this, it was just something that they did. Okay, you didn't have the choice. Okay, but the parents, by circumcising you, acknowledge that you're in the covenant. You're a descendant of Abraham. You come from a covenantal people. So they're required to teach you Torah. They're required to teach you the terms of the covenant that they agreed for you on your behalf. Okay, this also happens, something similar happens in Exodus, okay, when, remember the golden calf incident, right? A couple chapters prior, the elders went up to Mount Sinai and had a covenantal meal, and they all agreed to the covenant on their behalf. Okay, so was Israel liable for breaking the covenant then? Yes, because it was agreed to on their behalf. Same thing with our parents. Okay, on the 8th day, we get circumcised. Our parents agree on our behalf. Okay, think of it that way. Okay, so that's why they're obligated to teach us right and wrong.
And it's something else to notice that yes, they're agreeing to it on our behalf. At the same time, until we ourselves are considered adults in the Torah, the iniquity and our blood is on their hands. So it's their responsibility to teach us and to bear that responsibility to make sure that we don't do anything stupid until we ourselves become adults.
Yeah.
To then take responsibility for ourselves.
Yeah, thank you.
Take a balance.
So this is a sign of the covenant made in Abraham in Genesis 17. I'll be honest, I don't remember if I put this on the slide, so I wanted to talk about it now. It was circumcision of the heart, right? So actually I do, but I have the idea now, so I'll just talk about it now. Okay, so circumcision of the heart. Say on the 8th day you're circumcised, then what? You're good to go. You can do whatever you want. You can be as arrogant as you want. Right? No, that doesn't mean that you're circumcised of the heart. There's a big difference. Like bringing an offering. Okay, Isaiah 1 talks about this. Okay, if I bring an offering and it didn't happen in my heart first, is it valid? No. Right? So yes, I'm physically circumcised in this case. And then later, if I don't circumcise my heart, is my circumcision valid? No. That's what Paul's talking about. And what is it? Romans? Is it Romans or
I think Acts.
Acts 15? Acts 15 or Galatians? He talks about it in Galatians too. Okay. Now,
Or Romans 7.
Romans 7. There's also Romans 2, I believe. Talks
Romans
about
7
it
is where
too.
it talks about Abraham when he got recognized.
Gotcha. So you see that circumcision of the heart is pretty important too. It's actually more important than physically. But if it doesn't happen physically also, is it valid? It's a good question, right? So yes, if we recognize our sin, but we don't bring the offering, what happens? Is it valid? Probably not, right? Right, Rico? I think that's safe to say.
Absolutely.
That if we acknowledge it in our heart and we don't physically carry out the act of bringing our offering to the temple, it's invalid.
On the parasha that talks about bringing the offerings, nearly every occasion it says that you have recognized the guilt in your heart, then you bring the offering.
Exactly.
The other way around.
Exactly. So, yes, we have to be circumcised of the heart as well. Okay. Also, we have to do it physically for it to be complete. Okay. So let's talk about Genesis 17. When Abram, it wasn't Abraham yet. This comes after. When Abram was 99 years old, the Lord appeared to Abram and said to him, I am the God Almighty. Walk before me and be blameless. Okay, what does that mean, to be blameless? Any ideas? If I break the rules, am I to blame? If I break the rules, am I to blame? Yes. Okay, so if I don't break the rules, am I blameless? Yes. So don't break my rules, is what God's saying. Okay. That I may make my covenant between me and you, and may multiply you greatly. Then Abram fell on his face, and God said to him, Behold, my covenant is with you, and you shall be the father of a multitude of nations. No longer shall your name be called Abram, but your name shall be Abraham. So we see a name change, new creation, covenant. Okay. 5, made you a multitude of nations. I will make you exceedingly fruitful, and I will make you into nations, and kings shall come from you. And I will establish my covenant between me and you and your offspring after you throughout your generations for an everlasting covenant, to be God to you and to your offspring after you. And I will give to you and to your offspring after you the land of your sojournings, all the land of Canaan, for an everlasting possession, and I will be their God. And God said to Abraham, As for you, you shall keep my covenant, you and your offspring after you throughout their generations. So is it just Abraham that had to do it, or are we also obligated to do it because we're also now a descendant of Abraham? Is it?
We're supposed to do
Exactly. Okay. As for you, you shall keep my covenant, you and your offspring after you throughout their generations. That's forever. Okay. Yeah, that's us. We're adopted into this covenant. Okay. This is my covenant, which you shall keep between me and you and your offspring after you. Every male among you shall be circumcised. You shall be circumcised in the flesh of your foreskins, and it shall be a sign of the covenant between me and you. He who is 8 days old among you shall be circumcised, every male throughout your generations, whether born in your houses or bought with your money from any foreigner who is not of your offspring. Both he who is born in your house and who is everybody shall surely be circumcised. So shall my covenant be in your flesh, an everlasting covenant. This is important too. I know there's a lot of reading, I apologize. Any uncircumcised male who is not circumcised in the flesh of his foreskin shall be cut off from his people. He has broken my covenant. Okay, so a couple things to digest really quick before we move on. The covenant's everlasting. Does that mean 2,000 years, 4,000 years? Forever, right? For all generations. Okay, what happens if you're not circumcised? Be cut off from his people. He broke the covenant. Yeah, go ahead.
What if someone misses the 8 days?
Right. So that, for the majority of probably us in the room, where we didn't have the opportunity for our parents to do so on the 8th day, it's still obligated to be done. However, you should be circumcised of the heart first as well. Okay, because if you know that you're supposed to be circumcised and you wait and you wait and you wait, you don't want to do it, you don't want to do it, you don't want to do it. Yes. Because
it's less a matter of salvation and more a matter of obedience.
Yeah.
So if you're going to make the decision to join in the covenant at whatever age, and you decide I want to take that next step, I've already had the circumcision of my heart to believe and obey, then I want to take the next step and show and have a physical sign of that same
obedience. Right.
Exactly. Yeah. So again, it's if you don't know about it, like if I just found out about all this this year, and I had no idea before, how could I be held accountable to a covenant I've never agreed to or entered into?
Right.
Now, once I know and I decide to join and I decide to have that done, even at 31, now from that point on, okay, now I'm fully in the covenant because now I've taken on the last step, which is the physical sign.
But Abraham was justified prior to even being circumcised.
Because he was righteous.
Exactly. Because he walked with God. So the circumcision is kind of like the cherry on the top, right? So in Galatians, I believe the main issue in Galatians with circumcision they said it was for salvation, right? Acts 15. I wrote it in my notebook and it was all jumbled. So is circumcision required for salvation? No. Is following Torah required for salvation? No. Okay, but they go hand in hand. Okay, because you were saved, you should follow Torah. Right? That's usually how it goes, right?
If you want to put it this way, it's kind of like the analogy of somebody being a citizen.
Mhm.
You could stay a resident all your life if you want the full rights of a citizen.
Exactly. All right, and also everybody in the camp was circumcised. It's not like it was just Abraham or just his family. It was everybody. Okay. Oh, what's happening with my computer? Oh, okay. We see that a royal grant covenant, because this is a royal grant covenant. Okay, it is a royal grant covenant, but it's not technically unconditional. What did it require from Abraham and his descendants? Obedience. Okay. Circumcision is the sign of the covenant made with Abraham. If you're not circumcised and you are to be cut off, and you break the covenant. It's a pretty simple equation. Okay. So for a descendant of Abraham, what must we do? Be circumcised, both in the flesh and in the heart. Okay. So, and then I kind of already addressed this. This is a pretty prominent notion that in I don't want to just call out one thing, but say in Christianity where they say that we don't have to be circumcised anymore, right? Well, they'd be 100% incorrect, because if they read Genesis 17, it's everlasting, right? So even after the death and resurrection, we're still obligated to get circumcised.
Could you elaborate why they get it wrong? Where they get it?
So a lot of Paul's writings talks about how, there's specific instances where they say in the Pharisees in that sect would say that you have to be circumcised in order for salvation. And then Paul says, no, you don't have to be circumcised for that instance. And then they say, well, we don't have to be circumcised anymore. It's like, no, it's for the purpose of salvation. That's not what it's about. And then another said, well, for pride, right? I have pride in my salvation, or I have pride in my circumcision, but they're not circumcised of the heart. What's the reason? Right? And even in, I think in Romans 2, Paul says that there's value in being circumcised, much in every way. Right? So they just kind of we've done it too, where we just cherry pick and we take things out of context.
I think to add what you were saying, it's like there was a problem because they were like, before you even want to have that relationship with God,
Right, exactly.
you have to be circumcised. That was
And
like
then,
the main problem. Before you even do anything, you have to be circumcised. And that's when Paul was like, no, it's not like that's not the first number one step that you have to do. Like, that's not, you don't have to do that before.
Right.
Like that's something that comes, first your heart has to be in a good place before you can get into that.
In this instance of not being circumcised on the 8th day first, right? Because Abraham walked with God for how many, 20 years before he was circumcised?
Yeah.
And he was already an old man by the time.
Yeah. It's not something that's required to have a relationship. You have the relationship, and as a result, you have the circumcision.
Well, I think people also, when they read Acts 15, at the end, when they make the judgment that for the Gentiles, they only have to worry about not eating idols and not drinking blood. They think that's just the final judgment. But he also said that they're going to go to the synagogue.
And they're going to learn it
anyways. They're going to learn from Moses, the Torah.
Exactly.
Well, not directly from Moses, but that's an idiom.
Yeah, exactly. It's important to remember that during the first century, the Pharisees, the Sadducees, and the Sadducees were Hellenists, right? And the Sadducees actually have a really
what does that mean?
The Sadducees,
Hellenists.
Okay, this is right. So the Sadducees, as a separate order, have a really interesting story that goes back to the original story of Hanukkah, how we all hear about the lamps and all that stuff. But that whole story is about overthrowing Greek rule in Israel and overthrowing idol worship being enforced by the state. And so the heroes of that story then go on to be the Sadducees, who are people who mix in with the Greeks and become Hellenized. Hellenized is to take on the culture and the ideology of the Greek mindset. And to the Greeks, a couple things are not possible, such as resurrection. And they find that circumcision is actually barbaric and disgusting because they take pride in the human form as it is, not as it should be the way that Hashem is deeming. And then the Romans took on that same thing, which is why they saw the Jews as being a barbaric people and savages. That being said, the Sadducees then went on to start to weaponize these things like circumcision and to make the barrier of entry for Gentiles so high that no one would want to do it. Or they take the opposite approach, where they would limit what you should do. Say, oh, you don't have to keep the Torah. Just don't do these things and you're fine. In both cases, it's not correct because now you're taking people who want to join the covenant just as Abraham did, just like Moses, just like everyone else previously, and you're limiting them. And now you're taking that role of God and saying, no, you don't have to do this. You don't have to do that. or don't do this, or you have to do this if you want to be saved. They were trying to be the judge, jury, and executioner of it, and they were trying to weaponize everything that made the covenant what it was to keep it either more insulated or just to keep out people that they saw as being unclean.
Yes, thank you. All right, so circumcision, like an offering, okay, the offering happened in the heart first. Okay. Also, like prayer. Do you just go to prayer and you just say some jumbled words and that's it? That's not proper. No, not going there. Right? So it has to happen in the heart for it to be complete. Okay? So, yes, you can be physically circumcised and not be circumcised of the heart, and it's invalid. You can be circumcised of the heart, reject the physical circumcision, it's invalid. They go hand in hand. Okay? All right. So let's review. What does the 8th day represent? I'll recall. Resurrection. Thank you. Rico said it somewhere. I don't remember where he got it from. New creation? Because after 7 days of creation. Yeah, okay. Is the so-called sin offering mentioned in Leviticus 12 actually a sin offering? What's the correct terminology for it? Is it a sin? What's a sin in giving childbirth? No sin, so it's a purification offering. What is the correct translation for the sin offering mentioned? We already answered that. Who is to be circumcised?
Every descendant from Abraham.
Every male descendant from Abraham. Yes. What is the circumcision a sign of? Say it. Is it covenant? Yes, the covenant made with Abraham. Okay. All right, we're going to go to the L word. Okay, leprosy. All right. So we're going to read Mark 1. And Rico Jr. already brought this up a little bit. Okay. So, and the leper came to him, Yeshua, imploring him and kneeling, said to him, "If you will, you can make me clean." Moved with pity, Jesus stretched, Yeshua, sorry, I work at a Christian school, so if I said Yeshua, they'd probably freak out. Yeshua stretched out his hand and touched him and said to him, "I will be clean." In this instant, Yeshua just became ritually unclean until evening because he touched the leper. Ritually unclean. Not morally unclean. Nothing's immoral about that. Okay, it's just ritually unclean. Yeshua said, "I will be clean," and immediately the leprosy left him, and he was made clean. And Yeshua sternly charged him and sent him away at once, and said to him, "See that you say nothing to anyone, but go show yourself to the priest and offer for your cleansing what Moses commanded for a proof to them." But he went out and began talking freely about it and spread to the news, so Yeshua could no longer openly enter a town. Okay, let's talk about this real quick. Let's ask a couple questions. Okay, number one, what happened to the leper prior to this event? Why was he an outcast? Why did he ask Yeshua, of all people, for cleansing? Okay, we'll answer that. Why was Yeshua so adamant about keeping quiet? Okay, I thought that was also odd when I first read that. I'm like, why would he tell him to be quiet about that? That's crazy. Why did Yeshua send the leper to the priests? What was that? Right? Because if we only read the New Testament, we completely disconnect from all of the things that Yeshua does and why he says the things he does, why he does the things he does. Okay? Why do the events happen after the leper spoke up? No, it was supposed to be what were the events? Okay, sorry, I don't know English. What was the offering that made the leper had to do? What's the offering that the leper had to do? And who was the proof for? So let's reread this real quick before we move on. The leper came to Yeshua. Why would he come to Yeshua? You know? So in the Sanhedrin 98b and the Babylonian Talmud in the Mishnah, it talks about how the Messiah is going to be hanging out with the lepers. Okay? Because it was well understood that no leper in the land of Israel will be cleansed until Yeshua or until the Messiah showed up. Okay? Well, Yeshua healed 11. Okay, we see the instance of Miriam getting healed from leprosy. But where was she? Oops, in trouble.
But before that, bear this in mind. A leper is someone who is, once they're declared unclean, no one touches them, including their family. Mm-hmm. This person has not had contact with anybody in God knows how many years, decades probably. Then you have the Messiah, who just says, "Be clean." Just that by itself, I'm sure it meant so much to him. The fact that someone was willing to actually touch him.
Watch us get yelled at because they were like, "Who's talking in the hallway?" It's him. Okay, if anybody asks, it was Rico. All right. So yes, that brings up a good point. Okay, so back to the leper Messiah. Okay, why would he approach Yeshua? Because he believes that he was a Messiah. Okay, and if Yeshua was a Messiah, he would heal the leper. Okay, that's why he told him to be quiet, because everybody knew that. No, I did not.
You should mention that first, because there's a part where Yeshua talks to John the Baptist's disciples.
Mm-hmm.
He tells them about the miracles that he did, proving that he's the Messiah.
Mm-hmm.
He talks about the blind are healed.
Yeah.
The blind are healed. What is it? The
lame.
The lame can walk.
Right. Dead are raised.
The dead are raised, and the lepers have been healed. So a lot of people, they point to what book?
Isaiah 53.
Isaiah 53, right?
Yeah.
Well, when you read Isaiah 53, it doesn't say anything about lepers. Okay. But when you read it from the Talmud, they have like kind of like what I forgot the name, but it's kind of like a story, like a story that teaches. I forget what that's called.
It's kind of like
it's this form of teaching that Jewish people do, but in the form of a story. So the story in itself didn't happen, but it's a story to teach you an idea.
Mm-hmm.
So in this story, in the Sanhedrin 98 A and B, I believe, they're talking about the Messiah being among the lepers, healing them. So they had this concept from the Talmud that the Messiah would heal the lepers. So it's not going to be in the Bible. It's actually from the Talmud. And that's where people actually get that idea from. So when you go to Isaiah 53, you're not going to see it because it's an idea from the Jewish people in the Talmud, which is a big deal because that means that in the time of Yeshua,
don't let the door slam, buddy.
They were reading from the Talmud and things like that.
Also, important to note with how important it is to also study Jewish thought, right? Whenever we talked about Yeshua walking on water, right? That was such a weird thing, like completely out of left field. Why did that happen, right? Well, we established ancient Near Eastern connections to that. Okay, establishing over death, it's foreshadowed of resurrection. But also, it was thought of that in Genesis 1 verse 2, where the Spirit of God was hovering over the water, it was understood in Jewish thought that it was also understood as the Spirit of the Messiah hovering over the waters. And that was published around the time of Yeshua. So that's just a connection, okay? So, yes, Yeshua reached out, touched him, which is something that never would have happened ever, probably as long as he's had leprosy. He said, "I will be clean." Leprosy left him, and he was made clean. And Yeshua sternly charged him and sent him away at once. The reason he said not to say anything to anybody was because that would be generally understood that the Messiah is here. And everybody's going to know exactly who did it. Okay, and that's exactly what happened. All right. He sent him to the priest. In a little bit, we're going to talk about what happened after the fact. Because a lot of folks, they read this, and they don't ask the question of, okay, he goes to the priest, now what? Does the priest just look at him, okay, you're good. Okay, you're back into the community. No, he just spent how many, probably let's say 40 years outside of the community. Do you know how to work inside the community? No, right? So it's a big deal to talk about that process, and we will. Okay. Also, a proof for who? It says some translations say a testimony for them. For whom? He goes to over here. It says for a proof to them. Who's them? The priest, the Sanhedrin, the entire state of Israel is going to know that the Messiah is here. Okay, all right. So let's talk about Luke 17. This is the instance where Yeshua heals 10. All right. On the way to Jerusalem, he was passing along between Samaria and Galilee. And as he entered a village, he was met by 10 lepers. So whenever you see the number 10, immediately think house of Israel. When you see number 2, think the house of Judah, or the house of Judah and the house of Israel together in the case of the prodigal son. Okay? Okay. So, 10 lepers who stood at a distance. Why would they stand at a distance? Do they come into close contact with Yeshua? Nope. And lifted up their voices, saying, Yeshua, Master, have mercy on us. When he saw them, he said to them, go and show yourselves to the priest. I love how Yeshua didn't even say yes. He goes, go. Show yourself to the priest. Not even like a, yeah, sure, no problem, bud. You know, it was literally just go, you show yourself to the priest. Okay, and when he saw, yeah, he said that, as they went, they were cleansed. So they were walking on their way to the temple. Not, well, they can't go to the temple, they had to go outside the city. But as they were walking to Jerusalem, they were healed. What would happen if they didn't start walking? Would they be healed? No. Okay, so that shows obedience. Okay, that's faith. All right, they start walking. Then one of them, when he saw that he was healed, turned back, praising God with a loud voice, and he fell at the feet of Yeshua, giving him thanks. Now he was a Samaritan. Every time you see a one-liner like this, you need to pay attention as to why. Why would Luke go the extra mile, the extra 20 seconds it took to write that, to clarify who's a Samaritan? We'll talk about that in a second, okay? And then Yeshua answered, were not 10 cleansed, were the 9? Was no one found to return and praise God except this foreigner? So now we could connect a Samaritan to being a foreigner, okay? And he said to them, rise and go your way, your faith has made you well. So let's talk about Samaritans real quick. Okay, they don't acknowledge the prophets. Okay, so Isaiah, Jeremiah, Hosea, any of them. Go ahead.
Who are they? Where did they go?
It was the Assyrians, right? After they were Israel, and then the Assyrian.
When the Assyrians took over the northern kingdom, they call it the first scattering of the northern kingdom. A lot of them intermixed with the people that were the Samaritans.
Yep.
And so because of that, when the temple was rebuilt and the southern kingdom was reestablished, they didn't recognize the Samaritans actually part of Israel. They're so mixed. So it's kind of a weird racial thing. Yeah. Bear in mind that Jews hated the Samaritans. The Samaritans hated the Jews. Yep. And they even disagreed on where God put his name. Yeah. So Jerusalem is where he put his name. But the Samaritans believe it was in Shechem.
Yep. They also reject David as king. Go ahead.
Well, because they had this beef. Because, like you said, they wanted to help rebuild the temple. From what I understand, I think only the priests are allowed to help rebuild the temple. So these people that were mixed with foreigners became super intermingled. They wouldn't be allowed to do it anyway, even if they were regular Israelites. So then they had this animosity between each other because they felt rejected. So they try to make their own kingdom. And I think that's why there's that Samaritan woman that talks to Yeshua, and she says, "Oh, you believe that you have to worship on this mountain, if it's this mountain or that mountain." And then he says something. I forgot what it was, but he's talking about that. They had that belief that it's not Jerusalem, it's another mountain. That's beef.
So they don't acknowledge the prophets. Okay, I think they stopped reading at what? Joshua?
They only read,
Or the Judges. Joshua or Judges? Joshua? They don't acknowledge David as king, which causes problems because then they would reject Yeshua as well, because Yeshua stems from David. Okay, but it's funny. You have to appreciate the comedy of this situation. You have to. And yes, some stories in the Bible can be funny. All right. So you see that a foreigner, a Jewish man healed a foreigner. He healed a Samaritan, not just like any foreigner, a Samaritan. They really hated each other. Okay. But the Samaritan approached him. He has to go against everything that's right here. He has to acknowledge the prophets about him. They have to acknowledge David as king because the Messiah comes from David. Okay. Then where are the priests at? Are they going to be in Shechem? No. Are they going to be in Florida? No. Where do they have to go? They have to go to Jerusalem. But the Samaritans reject Jerusalem as God's holy city. All right, so you have to appreciate the comedy. You have 10 lepers. One of them's a Samaritan. Okay, and he requested Yeshua to heal him. Okay, so he already acknowledges that David is king. Okay, maybe not so, but indirectly he does. Because if he believes that Yeshua is the Messiah, he's going to heal him, you have to acknowledge David in that history. And then as a result, you also have to acknowledge the prophets. Because the prophets also spoke about that. Okay? And then you have to go to God's actual holy city, where he actually wanted to place his name, in Jerusalem, not Shechem. That's a big deal, right? So whenever Luke or anybody just says a one-liner like that, they took the time to write it for a reason. Go ahead. No, they couldn't. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, well, they didn't recognize it, one, and then the high priest the high priest, he was a Sadducee, and the Sadducees didn't want to do anything with the Gentiles. So now he's going to have to present himself in front of the high priest, who at the time was Ananias. I think it was Caiaphas. I think it was Caiaphas.
It was Caiaphas.
Caiaphas did the judgment issue.
That's true.
So he's going to have to present himself to Caiaphas, who doesn't like Gentiles. And he's going to have to acknowledge that he was cleansed. And not only that, but they understood at that time, he's going to talk about it, that leprosy was a disease that was given by God.
Yeah.
So now that he's cleansed, that means that God acknowledges his Samaritan and cleanses him. So now everybody in the community has to accept the Samaritan as part of the community.
Yeah. That's true.
Oh, that dude. Oh my God, he's been a leper for 30 years.
Also, keep in mind the fact that now this means that the Samaritans themselves have to accept now that yes, Jerusalem is the city. No, it's not Shechem. That and yes, David is the Davidic line is true, and God is there. So and the Jews are the chosen people. Right. So it's on both sides. People have to swallow their pride and admit that they're wrong. He has to. That's it. And now imagine that the priest who probably like every other Judean hates Samaritans is like, oh. Then you're saying that I don't recognize God's power.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like, will it be considered to will they, someone will kill them or something?
They'll get leprosy. I don't know.
Well, again, to take someone who everyone knows has been divinely healed, and you as the priest are saying, no, I don't recognize that. Now you're taking like umbrage with God, and that is where the term karetz comes in, which means you're cut off from God.
Mm-hmm.
At that point, more than likely, the priest probably dropped dead.
And it's going to be in front of all the people.
Yes.
Everyone's going to see you.
So they have to accept them. And everybody in Jerusalem is going to see a Samaritan being accepted and healed, divinely healed. He had to.
Again, this is the reason why it was causing such an issue. There's now, all right, now we have to admit so many things all at once that we thought were completely either impossible or wrong.
So that they on the Jewish side, they would have to accept Yeshua being as the Messiah, because everybody's going to know who healed the lepers. And they understood from their thinking that they knew that no leper was going to be healed in the land of Israel until the Messiah showed up. And here we go. We got 11 of them. Go ahead.
Well, here's the thing. What do you mean? So the question is, if someone like a Samaritan doesn't believe in any of that, do they go to heaven when they die?
Like, do we get resurrected? We're going to go to sleep, we're going to get resurrected.
Right.
They get resurrected.
Well, they have, again, there is also the final judgment. And it depends. I'm not going to, we don't really have an answer to that question because I'm not God.
Well,
so
everyone will have a chance.
Everyone has a chance, correct. Everyone has a chance, but the point is, at that time, especially in the first century, everyone had access to the knowledge. It's not like you're living on an island you've never even heard of the Torah. So if you're going to go out of your way to actively denounce it and hate it, even while the authority of God is on the earth, and speak against the altar, that's another thing. Mm-hmm. When the altar comes back, be sure to never speak against it. If you hear someone speaking against it, you move away from that person, because you're not talking against just a structure made by man. You're talking about the authority and presence of God physically on the earth. So if you're going to do that in the first century especially, then during that final judgment, it may not go very well for you.
I think the question that she was asking was more pertaining to rejecting Yeshua's messiahship. If they rejected that,
well, you strike the rock once, you don't strike it twice. Just like we learned with Moses.
I think it's important because I think you mentioned that not all the Jewish people believe the same thing. The Sadducees, they also didn't believe in the prophets. That's why they didn't do a lot of the rituals, water ritual, Pharisees, stuff like that. And then the Pharisees, they believe in resurrection, things like that. But not everybody believed the same thing. Not everybody's going to accept the truth.
But to elaborate a little bit further. So you have the two houses, the house of Judah and the house of Israel. The house of Judah stayed in covenant with the Father, right? The house of Israel needed redeeming, because actually both really need redeeming, right? But Yeshua's going to be over both. Okay, but in this instance, right, they were still in covenant. The redemption came for the house of Israel, right? Okay, so in that instance, if they reject Yeshua's messiahship, they're going to accept it when he comes back, right? They have to. Okay, so I don't think it was that important the first time. It is important, yes, and even they still converted. Like there were still Jews that converted, right? But it wasn't required for them in that instance until
There's the prophecy of the two messiahs, the suffering servant of Joseph and yet the King David. They wanted the kingly version to bring them freedom from the oppression of the Romans. What they got was a suffering servant of Joseph, who they struck down.
Yeah.
Just like with the story of the rock. Moses struck the rock the first time, but he was instructed to speak to the rock the second time. He struck it again, and he was not allowed to go into the land. So he was cursed to die outside of the camp. So it's like Messiah. You can strike him once. They did. You're not going to strike him again. The second time, he's not going to be there with the staff. He's going to be there with the sword.
Right.
So they think about it.
Address it. Okay, cool. What did Yeshua instruct all the lepers to do? Yeah, go to the priests. They couldn't go to the temple. They would actually have to go outside of the city, the priests, and look. On the iPhones. Actually, I don't know. That's a good question. I thought about that too. I was like, maybe there's a messenger out there, and they run.
Again, these are lepers that everyone knows. So when they start walking up and they're saying we're lepers, we're healed, people are going to be like, someone get a priest. I don't believe it. That is the thing. The area around the temple itself was part of the temple authority. You could have had priests just kind of doing the thing outside the temple. It was very common to take things outside the temple, bring them back in, outside of Jerusalem, bring them back in.
But it's important to know also that there's a specific priest for leprosy.
Yes.
It's not like the guy bringing the ashes to do it. It has to be a specific priest for leprosy. Okay.
What if the priest is the one that gets sick?
Well, it's the same situation. Right? Yeah. Yeah, it's divine punishment. Anybody can get it. Right? It's like Miriam's was Moses' sister, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
If a priest did get leprosy, then there's a lot of questions about who that priest is, what he was doing, what he's saying, what he's teaching, and now that brings out a lot more issues that need to be reconciled.
Yeah. Yeah, because they know what's right and wrong. So if they did it. It's a big deal. It's probably a big investigation. Why would it be a testimony to the priests and the Sanhedrin and of all of Israel by sending the lepers to them? What would be the message? The Messiah's there. That's the message. That's the testimony from Luke 17. That's the proof that they need, okay? Who turned back and gave thanks to Yeshua after being healed? The Samaritan. Which is that's beautiful if you think about it. Like he had to really swallow a lot of pride, right? He had to swallow pride just going up to him. But imagine coming back, he had no pride. Where did Samaritans think God wanted to place his name? Shechem. Were Samaritans thought highly in Israel? No, they were not. Okay. Let's discuss how they got there. Okay. This is a lot of reading. I'm just going to tell you that right now. Okay. But this is the case where what happened to the lepers before they went to go see Yeshua. Okay. Go ahead. This is a process. This is the process of them coming to the priest and getting the title unclean. Okay. So the Lord spoke to Moses and Aaron, saying, "When a person has on the skin of his body a swelling or an eruption or a spot, and it turns into a case of leprous disease on the skin of his body, then he shall be brought to Aaron the priest, or to one of his sons the priest, and the priest shall examine the diseased area on the skin of his body. And if the hair on the diseased area has turned white, and the disease appears to be deeper than the skin of his body, it is a case of leprous disease. When the priest has examined him, he shall pronounce him unclean." Okay. But if the spot is white in the skin of his body, and appears no deeper than the skin, and the hair in it has not turned white, the priest shall shut him up for 7 days. Quarantine. So let's see what happens. Okay, quarantine. Something Florida never did. Okay, and the priest shall examine him on the seventh day, and if if in his eyes the disease is checked, and the disease has not spread to the skin, then the disease shall shut him up another 7 days. Another quarantine, which Florida definitely didn't do. And the priest shall examine him again on the seventh day, and if the disease area has faded, and the disease has not spread in the skin, then the priest shall pronounce him clean. It is only an eruption. And he shall wash his clothes and be clean. Washing your clothes also can resemble a new creation as well. But if the eruption spreads in the skin, and after he has shown himself to the priest for his cleansing, he shall appear again before the priest. The priest shall look, pronounce him unclean. It is a leprous disease. When a man is afflicted with the leprous disease, he shall be brought to the priest, and the priest shall look. And if there is a white swelling in the skin, the hair is turned white, there is raw flesh in the swelling, it is a chronic leprous disease in the skin of his body, and the priest shall pronounce him unclean. He shall not shut him up, for he is unclean. And if the leprous disease breaks out in the skin, so that the leprous disease covers all of the skin of the diseased person from head to foot, so far as the priest can see, then the priest shall look, and if the leprous disease has covered all of his body, he shall pronounce him clean of the disease. It is all turned white. Question for you. When you get a scar, okay, if you get a scar, I have a couple on my arms, I think. What color does it turn?
Pink.
Pink or white. It's scar tissue. Okay, so from a medical standpoint, from right here, you can see if you have a raw flesh that was exposed, it's going to turn into scar tissue, which a lot of times for a lot of folks, it's white. Okay, so there's that. Okay, just 2 cents. Okay, when the raw flesh appears on him, he shall be unclean, and the priest shall examine the raw flesh and pronounce him unclean. Raw flesh is unclean, for it is a leprous disease. But if the raw flesh recovers and turns white again, he shall come to the priest, and the priest shall examine them, and he's clean. Okay, there's a skin, one's body, a boil, and it heals, and in place of a boil comes a white swelling, reddish spot. He'll be shown to the priest, and the priest shall look, and appears deeper than the skin. His hair is turned white. The priest shall call him unclean. I think that's about it right here. So, or when the body has a burn on its skin and the raw flesh of the burn has become a spot, reddish white or white, the priest shall examine it, and if the hair in the spot has turned white and appears deeper than the skin, it is a leprous disease. It has broken out of the burn, and the priest shall pronounce him unclean, if it is a case of leprous disease. But if the priest examines it and there's no white hair in the spot and it's no deeper than the skin, but it is faded, the priest shall shut him up 7 days, see what happens. Quarantine. If it's spreading in the skin, he's unclean. It's a case of leprous disease. But if the spot remains and faded and swelling from the burn, it's good. Okay. So it's essentially, it's a myriad. You know what myriad means? A lot. So leprous disease is an umbrella term that talks about a lot of different skin diseases. Okay. The medical community nowadays likes to call it Hansen's disease, which is essentially a nervous tissue issue. Okay, where say for example I can't feel my arm, and I put it on a burner. What's going to happen? Yeah, you're going to burn yourself, right? Or say I get bed sores, right? I can't feel anything, and I lay down for a really long time. What's going to happen? I'm going to get bed sores. But what if a house gets a nervous tissue issue, and can that get leprosy? Can a house get leprosy from Hansen's disease standpoint? No. So something's wrong with the modern definition of leprosy, because a house doesn't have nervous tissue, does it? It doesn't. So it's not Hansen's disease. Leprosy is an umbrella term for a lot of skin diseases. A lot of times it's going to be mold, fungus, bacteria. Okay, because we all know that mold can grow on houses, can it? Right? I lived in a really, really, really bad apartment, really bad, and it had mold, a lot of mold, and I got sick. Okay. So I know for a fact a lot of the stuff that's written in Leviticus 13 and 14 has to do with cleanliness and actually protects Israel from illness. So it's a pretty big deal. So I'm going to go ahead and skip a lot of this, okay? But let's talk about shame, okay? It's been off the whole time? Oh, that'll be embarrassing.
So the laws of cleanliness and purity didn't stop with the temple.
Mm-hmm.
As we know, the Great Assembly and the Sanhedrin codified a lot of them so that Jews could maintain that ritual sense of purity even after the temple was destroyed, and it became tradition. the tradition actually helped us during the Black Death in Europe, since a lot of Jewish communities still follow those same traditions of washing your hands, of having a mikveh, of essential basic cleanliness that a lot of people didn't have at that time in Europe. So a lot less Jews would die. The only issue is then a lot of the Christians then thought that the Jews were causing it because they were dying in less numbers, so then they would attack the Jews more. It was a bit of a vicious cycle. But the point is, these principles and concepts are fundamental, and you can see them throughout history actually being practiced by our people, and it actually working in terms of staying hygienic in some way.
Yeah. Thank you. All right, so if you get leprosy, it's a very shameful thing because it was thought of as divine punishment. Okay, like in the case of Miriam, she was talking bad about Moses, right? Oh, was it? Oh, okay. I was wrong about that. Gotcha. Oh, that's true too.
Stay in your lane,
Go ahead.
King. He stayed king because so here is the thing: when he was king by divine right, because he was of the line of David, so he legally could stay king. The reason he got leprosy is because he wanted to do the same job as the high priest.
Yep.
So when you start trespassing on another role, which was divinely given to another tribe, another family, that goes against God, which is the reason why he got specifically leprosy, which was a moral issue. It wasn't like he got some kind of skin infection because he was living in a bad apartment. Very different thing.
Was there leprosy outside of Israel?
No, would the king have to go?
Well,
That's a good question.
Being that he was the king, I'm sure he could afford to quarantine in a better way to make sure that no one else was getting sick. But considering the fact that it was a divine disease, I don't think it was affecting everyone the same way regular leprosy was. So I think this is one of those issues where I don't think it was Hansen's disease. I think it was a more divine, strange disease because it probably wasn't contagious in the same way that Hansen's disease is.
So he.
I see what you're saying.
Yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So how come the king wasn't cut off? I think it's because of the divine right.
Because it was
kind of like with David or Saul. They don't want to kill him.
That's a good point. I never considered that question. Good question. So, like Rico had just said, leprosy was a moral issue. Okay, it's divine punishment for something. Okay, so shame would be appropriate, wouldn't it? It is. It's a shameful thing. Okay, so they had to wear torn clothes. Everywhere they had to go, or everywhere they went, they had to say unclean, unclean. Okay, that's humiliating. Okay, they were not inside the camp either. Okay, so they were completely cut off from the holy city. Okay, they had to live as what?
Beggars, essentially.
Essentially beggars, right? And then they had to everywhere. Say they went into Walmart, they had to say, "I'm unclean, I'm unclean." They wore torn clothes. Like it's a shameful thing. Okay, but this is a beautiful thing when you consider at the end. Like for those 11 folks that Yeshua healed, they have the same honor and dignity as a priest at the end. Okay, but they're not priests. We'll talk about that. Okay, so you see, it's a complete reversal. They were complete bottom of the bottom of the barrel, Walking Dead. The original Walking Dead. Okay.
TM.
Huh?
Original Walking Dead.
What's TM? Trademark. Oh, sorry.
Oh, good.
Sorry, YouTube. Anyways. So you see that this was a big deal. Like this was a shameful thing. Okay. All right. And we're gonna it continues on the process of how they were deemed unclean. Okay. So now we know what happened before they went to go see Yeshua. They went to a priest. Okay. They had leprosy. They were called unclean. They had to leave. Okay. So then I don't know, however X amount of years later, they see the Messiah, the Yeshua, and they ask to be clean. Okay, then what happens? We'll talk about that, okay? So the first stage of this whole situation, okay, this is what happens. Yeshua cleansed them, healed them, okay? They were instructed to go to the priest. Now, could the lepers go inside the city? No. So in Leviticus 14, it says that the priest will go outside the camp and see what's going on with the leper, okay? And if the priest says, okay, you're good, let's start this whole process, it starts, and this starts, okay? But if they say no, it doesn't happen. So this is very important for the Samaritan, if you think about it, okay? If the Samaritan gets healed and they go approach and the priest comes out and they say, no, I refuse. Well, one, they reject God, okay, because that was a moral divine punishment, okay, and it was lifted, which says that God no longer sees them as a moral sinner, okay. So if the priest rejects the leper, the priest would reject God. That's not good, okay. But this whole process can't occur without the approval of the priest, okay. That's why it's so important to go to the priest. So the first stage, you get a cedar branch, a hyssop plant, crimson wool, and 2 birds. We're going to talk about the hyssop plant here in a minute, okay? So you slaughter one of the birds, okay, over a vessel of water, and you bury the bird, okay? Again, please keep in mind, these rituals probably seem completely weird, and that's your perspective, and you're probably right, okay? I remember reading a lot of these. I'm like, okay, this is ridiculous, but it's for a reason, okay? Because we'll see that. Go ahead. That's also fair. And a lot of this is for visual purposes. They're already cleansed. Okay? But this is for all of Israel to see visually what's happening internally. Okay? That's true. No, it's just a yeah. Yeah, it's like you were sick, okay, and you feel better, but you want to go to the doctor just in case. You know you're okay. You go to the doctor, and the doctor gives you a clean bill of health, and now you feel better. You have that receipt, that piece of paper that says you're good to go. Okay, but you already knew it. Okay, but if the school required that sheet, and you didn't get the sheet, but you said you're good to go, are you going to be accepted into the school? No. So this is this part. We have to get the sheet to legally be allowed inside the school. Okay.
The cedar branch, the hyssop plant, the crimson wool, and the 2 birds. God doesn't need any of that, but the people who are being cleansed need that for the peace of mind.
Yes.
So they need to know that the demons are that your moral impurity is being washed away or being driven away by this bird which is flying away. It doesn't make any sense to us because we don't live with that same society. But if we did, which there are some parts of the world that still do, so if you did this ceremony over there, then they would, oh, thank God, okay, there goes my moral impurity. Let's continue on.
Right. All right. So again, none of this actually does anything per se, but it does with death. Which psalm was it with David? No. Yeah. Which one was that? I forget. So it was after one of the sins that David did. He said, "Cleanse me with hyssop." He's a dead man walking, right? David was. So it's connected with death, but it also has stuff to do with cleansing and purification. So it's no coincidence then that it's involved with cleansing a leper. Okay. The second stage is the second shaving. I forgot to add this to add a slide about it, but let's talk about shaving real quick. So back in the first stage, we have shaving hair. Okay, if something I don't do, which I should do, because I have this monstrosity right here, I need to trim it and shave it. My wife can agree. But say we have a date night, okay, and I don't shave, right? I look bad, look all disheveled, right? I came back from work. Okay, say I'm wearing the same clothes from work. I don't shave. I don't take care of myself. Could you tell if I'm going on a date or if I'm going to work? You don't know. So if I shave, if I make myself look good, I immerse myself in a bath, say I take care of myself, I come out a new creation. No longer am I going to work. That's just, I don't stink. Okay, so shaving hair, you also see that with Joseph in Egypt. He was in prison, okay, and they took him out, and what do? They shaved his body and they gave him nice clothes, okay, because it's a new creation. He's a new creation now. He went from shame to honor. Okay, just like the leper went from shame, he's working himself towards honor. Okay? Also with the immersion, same thing. In Christianity, it's known as the baptism. Okay, so you get immersed and you come out, what? A new creation. Okay, same thing. It's called a mikvah. You come out a new creation. Born again, yes. Okay, also I do want to clarify, I'm really going to do a lot better at not calling out a specific system of religion, which is, I think, something that we all should work on, all of us, on their part too. Because I've been thinking a lot about it, and a lot of the issues that we have are just from us not doing our due diligence. right? Christians not doing their due diligence, us not doing our due diligence. It's something that it's a big old misunderstanding. And it hurts that our brothers and sisters are mad at us over stuff that's honestly kind of trivial, right? And it's not fair to them that we call them out and we say stuff like that, because whenever they do it to us, we get butthurt. And that's not fair. That's not fair. Okay? So from now on, I'm really going to try to do better at, instead of giving a specific example from, say, Christianity, I had to kind of today because it was specific to their perception of circumcision, right? But I'm not going to sit here and be like, well, they did this and they're wrong because of this. I'm just going to say, this is what happened. This is their perception, okay? This is what Scripture says. It's up to you. I'm not going to say a single thing other than that, okay? Because I think it's not fair that we stand up here and we say harsh things that could be perceived harsh, okay? Especially when I say it. I don't know how to not be nice about stuff. I really don't. So I'm just not going to say it.
Are you saying that you're going to love thy neighbor? Is that what you're saying?
Yes. I'm going to do better at that. Okay, it's something that I really need to work on, which a lot of us also need to work on. Some of you are better than us. My laptop's dying? Oops. I got it. Go ahead. Yes, I can. The hyssop plant? Yeah. It's in the middle one. First stage, sure. I'll go back to the hyssop plant for you, okay? 7 would be letting go of the bird. Yeah, I forgot to add that part. I'm sorry. It should be in there. Thank you. So, yeah, I really do want to do better at not calling out a system of religion. I'm not a fan of system religions, any of them, actually, because once you do that, you add traditions and all this stuff that take away the authority from the Torah and all that stuff. So I don't like any of them. I'll just be honest, I don't. But I think it's also not fair that I call them out. I don't think that's fair, especially when it's kind of out of left field. Okay, it's undeserved. So I'm going to do better. All right, but be patient with me. This is a process. Okay, because I don't like it whenever they call me out about stuff and I'm wrong. I'm like, okay, I might be. So it's not fair that I do it. Okay, moving on. Hyssop plant. Did you want to write this down? I know you wanted to write that. You did? Okay, cool. All right, so the second stage, 7 days later. Okay, we have a second shaving, which we now know is like a new creation. Okay. This time, though, he shaves everything, not just his hair on the top of his head, his eyebrows, his beard, his nose hair. Right. Looks like Mr. Clean. Yes. Right. So it's a second immersion as well. Okay. So you're immersed once, you get shaved, you do it again. Okay. And then after that, you still have to do more stuff. Like you could stop here and it's still not valid because you have to be re-indexed to the altar, right? So if you're not re-indexed to the altar, you're not really part of the community because you were an outcast. So you have to work on coming back into the community. So yes, a lot of these are kind of weird. They're all for a reason. Go ahead. I know you're itching to ask a question.
You know how first crosses here that you're transitioning from what you were before and becoming part of like this type of
Yeah.
I want to say religion, but like I guess disbelief. They do like the immersion and everything. Will it be like something because they're immersing like themselves in the water? Mm-hmm. How many times will they do it every time? Like once in the water, or like right. 7 times in the water, or like dipping themselves? Yes.
Once or
will
7?
It be 7 times first and then 3 times first, not second.
So the mikvahs themselves. So the mikvahs themselves and the way that they were structured, we need to understand it wasn't just like a hole with water in it. It wasn't like a pool or the ocean. It was a structure which you had steps to go into the water, and then you kind of took like a left turn around a column, and then you take steps out of the water. So it was like you're walking in, you're being submerged, and you're walking back out.
So it was like a one thing.
Mm-hmm. So it wasn't necessarily like how it's portrayed these days, where you just kind of like duck under the thing and then come back up. It wasn't necessarily the way it was done in the temple.
Also, I forgot to add pictures, but in the temple there's a cistern right underneath the chamber for the lepers.
I think it's cistern 27. What it was?
I don't know the number. I don't remember the number.
But yes, you're right. There was a chamber specifically made for this step of the process for lepers that had never been used up until this time.
Think about that. Like, that's crazy. We have the rules for cleansing lepers, and no lepers was cleansed. Like, that's crazy. But it's here for a specific reason, for the arrival of Hamashiach. That's crazy to think about. Like, imagine being frustrated. Like, imagine a scholar like reading the Torah. It's like, okay, listen, God, you gave us these rules and we've never been able to use them. Why? And then imagine the anxiety that the priest felt when that leper was finally cleansed. He goes, I don't even know what to do. Like, what the heck?
I don't even opened this door before. I don't even know how to get in here.
Not in the land of Israel.
No. Again, it is a sign of the Messiah when lepers are healed.
Yeah.
So it is a major event. And they had the infrastructure, they had the structure, they had a whole cistern of water for this exact purpose. And everyone knew what it was. Everyone knew what it was for. Yeah. But no one ever used it. It was never a need until this time. Mm-hmm. And then that's why when he told everybody what was going on, that's why everyone freaked out.
Yeah. Pretty much. That's why why Yeshua told the guy, don't say anything. Because the second he does, it's going to be all over the place. It's going to be on Fox News. It's going to be on CNN. Like, it's going to be on everywhere. Because everybody knows the Messiah is here. That's what that means. Okay. All right, so we have second shaving, second immersion. Okay, finally he's allowed to, after this, at nightfall, he's allowed into his tent. Okay, but he still can't enter the whole, the Azarah of the temple or eat any holy offerings yet. Okay. I forget exactly what. The inner court. Yeah, so he's allowed on the outer court, right? Because, well, he has to go to the Nicanor gate anyways. For the women?
You have the court of women, and then the court of Israel, and the court of the Levites, and all that. So he would have been able to go up, I think, to the court of women, but then go in past the Nicanor gate, you have the court of Israel, and that ascends out to the court of the Levite, which is where the Azah is, which is where they slaughter the animals and do all the stuff, where the altar is. So he wouldn't be allowed there because that is a higher level of Kedusha than every other part of the temple and every other part of Jerusalem and every other part of the world.
Okay, so I'm taking this directly from Rico's presentation from Temple Course 103. Okay, without his permission.
I'm pretty sure he's using some of those right now.
Perfect. I do give him credit at the end of the slide, just so you know. This is direct. Actually, this entire second section of this circumcision was mine, in case you didn't know, because it was really bad. This one was Rico's, because it's a lot better. Okay. They're not done, are they?
No, they're just in front
of. Okay. I was like, oh my goodness. Okay, let's hurry up and get through this. We only got 15 minutes. Okay, so this is the second step. Whenever they kill the bird, okay, they put the blood inside the water and they bury the bird. Okay, priest holds an earthenware bowl. Okay, it's clay, pretty much a clay bowl, which contains about 4 ounces of spring water. A lot of translations in your Bible will say living water, fresh water. What that means, though, I have commentary on it actually somewhere in my slides. It means I took it from Zondervan. It means moving water. Okay. He orders the other Cohen, the other priest, to slaughter one of the birds over the bowl. The slaughtered bird is buried in the presence of the leper. Okay, so here you see you dip your cedar wood, the crimson wool, the hyssop plantain, the alive bird into the bowl. How come the commentator? Okay, yes, it dips inside the bowl, sprinkling onto the Metzorah, which is the cleansed leper. Okay, sprinkling on him 7 times. Notice that the sprinkling of the prevailing method in temple service for blood manipulation by the priests. Never did they wash anything with the blood. Okay, what do? They didn't wash. They sprinkle. Okay, with the honeycomb looking thing. All right. Also important to note, who can manipulate the blood? Priests. So there's this is funny because there's a movement where, like, say on Passover, like, folks will go kill a lamb, put the blood on the doorpost in the order of Melchizedek. Well, that's a problem. It's not that's a problem because only Cohen could, an ordained, ordained is the wrong word, anointed, a kosher priest could manipulate the blood. Okay, we could kill it, sure, but what happens to the blood then? We can't touch the blood. We can't move the blood. Only a kosher priest could do so. at the temple for the altar.
With the Sanhedrin back in power.
Yeah.
It's the only way it's going to work. If we kill a lamb, we are to dump the blood out and bury it. That's what it's.
Yeah, we can't put it, like, we can't sprinkle it in, like, that's not our authority. That's not our place. Okay, so in here, here's a commentary from the Zondervan. 2 live, clean birds. This elimination ritual symbolically transfers ritual impurity from the recovered person to the living birds by means of the other slain bird. So again, it's all visual. Literally, if he lets go of this bird, does that mean, oh, finally I'm cleansed? No, he was already cleansed. Okay, that was a precursor. Okay, this is a visual representation of what's happening. Okay, it's all for the leper, it's for the priest, it's for everybody watching. Okay, that this man is coming from a state of shame to a state of honor. Okay, and this is the process that God instructed us on how to do it. It doesn't have. Here's the thing, though. It doesn't have to make sense to us. It doesn't. It doesn't matter if it doesn't make sense to you. That's the way God said to do it. That's the way we got to do it. It's for a reason. All of these rituals are for a reason, even though they don't make sense. Heck, I still think 79% of them still make no sense to me.
There's a lot of laws in America these days that make absolutely no sense. But
it's for a reason.
Follow them because that's the law.
Actually, in the commandments, there's some that are categorized as that. There's commandments that are known as hukat, which means that they don't understand what's the purpose of it, like the ashes of the red heifer.
Yeah.
Right.
They don't know how it works or what's the purpose of it and what does it mean. They just know that God acts, so you just gotta follow.
It doesn't have to make sense to you. You don't have to like it. That's another thing, right? It's like, oh, I woke up today. I don't really feel like following the commandments. You know, I don't really like it. I don't agree with them. I don't understand them. Right? It doesn't matter. Okay, if you're circumcised of the heart and you want to obey God, what do you have to do? Obey Him. It doesn't matter if it doesn't make sense to you. Okay, and that's something that I myself every single day have to come to terms with. It doesn't matter if I like it or not. Okay.
Again, there's a lot of things your parents tell you or do that makes no sense to me. There's some things my dad told me that makes no sense to me. Do it.
We got to do it. Yeah.
But it makes no sense to me though.
Yeah, it's like a pride,
Yeah, it's like okay. See, but now I'm gonna have a child soon, so pretty soon I'll be in that role.
Yeah.
Tell them things that they won't make any sense, but I know better. I know what I'm talking about.
But
it's a different thing.
You still have to do it in the sense of, okay, my king wants me to do this a certain way. I have to do it a certain way, right? And like whenever I first started with this whole thing, I was like, why do we wear tzitzit? What the heck are these, right? At first, I was embarrassed. Actually, I was actually embarrassed of wearing them. Now it's my favorite commandment. Actually, I embrace it. I would love to wear them all the time. I should wear them all the time, right? My kippah. I remember she told me for the wedding. She goes, "Can you wear a kippah?" I'm like, no, why? Right? Yeah, but I was embarrassed. I was like, I don't know the purpose of it. I don't know why. Okay, but you slowly as you do things, you learn to appreciate it, and you fall in love with it. Like, I ordered these books to learn how to pray, like, and to learn why we say the things that we do. I remember I really didn't like the Mika when we first started doing it. I was like, I don't understand it. I don't like it. Right? I'm the man that if I don't understand it, I don't like it. Right? So I'm seeking to understand it. The more I understand, the more I love it. I love it. And even though I don't understand it, I still learn to love it because my king told me to do it. Right? So, anyway, enough about me. Okay, so the birds were about a visual representation of the ritual impurities leaving the leper. Okay. Because all of this, by the way, is like for the ritual purity. He was already morally pure, or purified, I guess, cleansed, because it's a divine punishment, and only the divine can heal you, right? And if the divine heals you, you're morally cleansed. So all of this is for the ritual cleanliness, okay? Fresh water. This is the commentary I found. It's appropriate that living water meant fresh, flowing water, okay? It wasn't just like, oh, there's a puddle from the rain. Let me grab this, right? Like, no, it's from a spring. It's from moving water. It's actually good. It's actually clean. It's a lot cleaner that way because imagine a puddle sitting there for months. What's going to be growing in that? Bacteria, mold, okay? So it's safer, actually. It's more clean for the purpose of that, okay? So cleansing the clothes, okay? Clothing and other objects, which the Metzorah, again, the person that was just cleansed, okay, has made tamei. Tamei is unclean, right?
Yes.
Yes, tamei and then tahor is clean. Right? Yeah, thank you. Or immersed in a mikvah, okay, in an immersion. Okay, ritual purity versus moral. We just talked about that. Okay, this isn't about moral purity. This is ritual purity. Okay. For shaving, these steps are rites of passage in order to prepare him for a change of status. Okay, so first he was in a status of shame, a lot of shame, pretty much as low as he could get. Okay, now he's going to go from here all the way on the bottom, all the way to the top, like a priest. Go ahead. I would assume so. Yeah. Yeah.
It just so happened that in the case in which they were healed, it was men who were healed, but I'm sure any woman who was a leper in the same case would also have to shave their head.
Mm-hmm.
Miriam, that's a different case because that was a divine punishment and there was no temple, so these commandments could not have been fulfilled. Because they're way out in the wilderness. I mean, it could have been, but again,
it wasn't there. Was it there? It was during the wilderness.
Again, it wasn't a usual case of leprosy. It wasn't a normal thing, and then she was healed anyway in a divine way, like 7 days. So there wasn't really a need to go through this entire process. Considering, again, it was done in front of everybody. Considering she talks smack, and then she gets stricken with leprosy, and then 7 days later she no longer has it because I believe that Moses intercedes on her behalf. So because of that, there wasn't a need to go through this entire process.
All right, so these steps are rites of passage to prepare him for a change of status. Honor status reversal is the key to the step. That's what he's talking about today. I was nosy and I looked at his slides. He's talking about honor status reversal. Yeah, I'm a pro at it now. The essence of these steps is to restore the honor and dignity of the leper into the community, forever restored and purified, okay? All right, The Walking Dead. Wait a minute. Oops. Died. Gotcha. Alrighty. So The Walking Dead, the original Walking Dead. The leper becomes tahor, clean, in 3 stages. The first stage was dipping the bird, okay, letting it go. The first shaving and the immersion, okay. The second stage follows that with 7 days later with the second shaving and immersion, which we'll talk about here in a second. So the leper becomes clean in 3 stages. The first stage was the first shaving and tevilah, the mikvah, the immersion. Okay, in this first stage, he continues to be unclean to the extent of making objects unclean, but he no longer makes things unclean without touching them directly. Again, so I could touch this. Now this is unclean.